has Maxlore? Well, very debatable. So I'm looking at him to be one of the big playmakers this game, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he can lead his team to equalize this score, or if they will continue to fall down the standings.
Well, this pick and ban, by the way, very different. You know, what you were talking about, who's going to step up, who's going to lead their team, really targeted bans. Anivia, Camille, Cassiopeia, Tristana, these are not the traditional power picks that we see ban out, but it feels like very specific, very targeted, my team versus your team, and we don't want to deal with that.
And, you know, right now we haven't seen any targeted bans towards the supports. We've talked a lot about how these two are two of the big playmakers, and it's really worth highlighting how much of an impact they have had, because we look back at the Misfits game versus Fnatic, where Mikyx was the one that secured the Baron, and you look at some of the plays that Kasing was able to pull off, and he's been equally as impactful for his team, and that's why we talk so much about these two supports and the impact that they're going to have over the next few weeks and as they approach playoffs.
All right, the one thing that was left open though was Galio, and of course that's instantly locked in. Sencux and Misfits have played that several times, the split 3 in fact, and I distinctly remember the very first time I saw it in Sencux's hands and Misfits, I felt they were slow to pull the trigger. That was not true in more recent weeks. They've definitely learned to play around that more frequently and to try and match some of that global pressure, or, you know, side lane pressure. Nisqy's going to lock in the Ryze to be complemented by Kobbe's Caitlyn.
Interesting. So, I would, like, funnily enough, Misfits were one of the first teams this year to bring out the Galio, and as you rightly said, like, when we saw them play against G2, they kind of got shut down by G2 very effectively, and since then we haven't really been able to see them properly utilize it. Now we're getting to see them try it out again, where Galio is much more in the meta, where we've seen teams very effectively take advantage of it. And I love the fact that we're seeing a Varus from Misfits. I had this wonderful conversation yesterday with Deficio, where we were both like, why do Misfits keep picking Ezreal? It feels like that they're failing to properly execute it, they're failing to properly utilize it, and if they want a strong laner with a good mid-game spike that can scale well as well, Varus is someone that meets all those criteria.
He does indeed, and of course Ezreal, you talk about Misfits, they were in fact the most successful team with that champion. It's not saying much because league-wide it's got about a 34% win ratio, so that's struggling a little bit. To round out phase 1 will be junglers. So it's Olaf for Maxlore, Zach for Xerxe. We've seen Xerxe handle that champion 4 times already, 4 wins under his belt. For Maxlore, this will be a first-time Olaf, and of course it was banned in the 2 previous games. So flavor of the weekend, maybe, for EU as it's starting to grow in priority.
Yeah, we've been seeing it pretty much all over the world, really. We've been seeing a lot over in North America. We've seen it over in LCK. And I think that as a jungler, it just seems to be rising in priority. His ability to duel is extremely good, but it is important that you get early leads. That's always been one of the big things about Olaf, because he's a champion that kind of runs at you, and he doesn't really do much more than that. Once he gets onto you and he closes the target, he's great, he's wonderful, he's having a big impact. But if he can't get that early lead and he doesn't get tanky enough to be able to run at you, then he kind of loses his value, and you can just focus him down and shut him out of the fight right from the get-go. So Misfits doing what they've done for a very long time, playing towards early game leads.
Yes, and of course can be enabled as well by the rest of the comp. Got the Galio, I can jump on top of him. We already know that Nisqy's running the Ryze, so what counters will be thrown up? I see Braum still open and available as the target support bans are Rakan and Alistair. Reply from Misfits is the top lane bans of Trundle and Sion. So those pools being pinched ever so slightly. Where do these teams go now?
So I feel like Splyce could consider a Zilean here. I love what Splyce have done from the beginning of the split, which is you empower the Caitlyn in the mid-game to have that really speedy setup, and you can just run at the enemy and you have a really powerful mid-game because the amount of poke that you can get off. So they're actually going to save their support for last pick, because in my head, Misfits are kind of considering looking at things like a Braum or maybe even a Janna. And Splyce want to try and guarantee if the Braum is locked in, Zilean is the likely answer. If it's a Janna, Thresh is the kind of pick that they're looking for on the side of Splyce.
All right, Kasing, of course, has played that Zilean 3 times, also undefeated on the champion.
Wow.
So we'll see how this last phase plays out. The Cho'Gath will round out Splyce's top lane choice. Terrifying combination in the mid-game already with that Caitlyn and Cho. Braum will be locked in, so this opens up that Zilean possibility that you mentioned. Unless Kasing has got something else to play. And of course, earlier in the week, think it was Nisqy in an interview was talking about how Kasing is the most important player for Splyce, not only as an individual, but as a leader and as a voice in and out of game. The team comp is rounded up for Misfits. It's a Maokai. Sorry. Why did you turn your nose up that badly?
I was literally about to say, I think we could see a carry out here from Alphari. You've got a nice tank in the mid lane, kind of off tank with the Galio. You've got a big front line with the Olaf too. I'd love to see Alphari kind of put on a carry. Go back to the old school style of Alphari, Hansama being the big, reliable damage dealers. And then they put him on a Maokai and I make that noise. So I think in terms of the team comp, it's fine. You have another front line, you have more follow-up. I'm a little worried about the damage output from Misfits. I have this long debate with Deficio all the time about, like, I personally think that Galio, in terms of team fight damage, he has good burst, but he doesn't have a huge amount of damage outside of that initial burst, so you're mainly relying on the Varus. Whereas for Splice, they have the Cho'Gath ultimate, they have the Ryze plus the Caitlyn, so they have two very strong, like, mid to late game spikes. I guess Ryze is a little bit more focused on the early game, but regardless, I think that I kind of like the Splice composition a little bit more. I feel like they have a little bit more in terms of options in how to play the game, whereas for Misfits, they're very reliant on getting an early lead with the Olaf. They need to make use of this Galio, either in the bot lane or in the top lane, and focus is going to be on Misfits to be proactive, and they have done it before, but often they get those early leads and then they fail to close the game out.
Yes, I agree with that. And of course, you talked a lot about the damage that Janna locked in for Kasing. A slight pivot in that pick and ban from the Zillion, but it makes perfect sense. You can heal up what little damage is being put down and allow you to reset a fight somewhat. Allow you to try and push away that Maokai and that Galio ever so slightly. Now, the one thing that Misfits do have, when they do pull the trigger, either with Maokai coming in from a side TP or Olaf running in, the Galio ultimate, the hero's entrance, is a huge game changer in the early stages of the match.
Yes. I'm also looking at these fights, right? It's going to be really hard for Splice to stop that Galio getting into the fight. But the one thing you always have to remember when playing against the Galio is, excuse me, if you can prevent him from ulting, his impact in fights is very much mitigated. So the way in which you can limit his playmaking power is if you notice he's kind of grouping up with his team, engage on the Galio. Actually make it really difficult for him to have options as to where he can ulti and offer his value. And that's something that Splice actually have a wealth of opportunities to do when you have champions like the Xerxe and a Righteous Glory on the Cho'Gath as well.
Ooh, okay, so options then. Gank that mid lane, go to the global. It's one of the things we talk about a whole lot when people are in that scenario. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the referees and QA team are behind Hansama. And Vedius, the reason I paused there, I got an update from our production team. It is a reported desktop resolution issue that is being checked on. But our theory that we discussed 2 games ago about the QA team standing behind the guy checks out, dude. We're 2 for 2.
It does indeed. So nailed that one.
Also, I have another thing for you.
Yeah.
If Splice are to lose this game, they will be tied in the standings with Misfits at 8 wins and 7 losses.
Indeed.
However, if Misfits, Splice are to win this game, and they're starting to challenge G2 eSports for that quarterfinal bye, I distinctly remember last weekend Deficio making a very bold statement that Splice will overtake G2 and get that quarterfinal bye before the end of the regular season.
I seem to recall him saying a similar thing on the Euphoria podcast. I can't remember where it can be found though, so...
Yeah, I'm not sure myself. I think you can, check out Euphoria podcast on iTunes as well as SoundCloud.
And YouTube,
yes,
I think,
yes.
is the other one.
They've trained us well.
Yeah, and you can listen to, I think Yankos was on this week. The G2 squad that, funnily enough, you spoke to about Splice overthrowing them.
It's super, like, BM.
Quite.
To invite a guest to your show, bring them into your home, and then be like, yo, bruh, you're going to get knocked out of semifinals.
Indeed. So that's something you can go and enjoy. But in terms of right now, yes, expectations from some analysts are that Splice will be able to climb up to second. And
why do you say some analysts, Vedius? What are you wanting to say but not saying?
I am not convinced just yet.
Okay.
But I feel like we can talk. I want to save it for game.
You want to save it for?
I want to save it for game. I want to save it for game because there's a lot of things to talk about. I think Splice is looking good right now. I'll give them that credit.
I tell you what. hold on to that.
Okay.
You don't need to worry because I just want to give the viewers an update that our technical team will be rebooting the PC and investigating the scenario with Hansama. And we're just busy getting the analyst desk ready. So I'm not going to put you on the spot. We're going to save your opinion for game. Maybe we can prepare some shenanigans. And of course, while we're waiting for these players to get ready, let's head over to the analyst desk to take a look at the draft.
Thank you very much, QuickShot. Just to update, it is a resolution issue. We'll keep you guys informed as we move forward. I know you're not always excited to see the analyst desk after draft, but the good news is people here have opinions on what's going on. Now, I'm going to say, when we get the draft up here momentarily, I feel like Misfits took some big, fat risks in this draft. Is that a fair statement?
What is one of the risks you are concerned about?
I am concerned that they are going to be too reliant on a successful early game to win out here.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a Misfit strategy for most of the split, and then they've gotten to the late game, and then it's kind of fallen flat in some of the games. But when I see Olaf and Galio, I think that combination is good. When I see Maokai, I'm always like, okay, fine, you just need a tank-v-tank top matchup, and he can lock down one target. But against things like Janna, Maokai's impact in fights outside of his long-range ult might be limited. And I'm a little bit afraid that Misfits comp, if it doesn't initially kill someone when it engages, it just loses the sustained DPS fight after.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be all on Maxlore playing Olaf. I want to see how he does because, you know, you have Varus, Braum bot lane versus Kate Janna. That's going to be pushed permanently on the tower. You could lose tower in 8 minutes like we saw last game if you don't get help from your jungler, but then Maokai needs some help as well in top lane, and mid lane needs some help as well. So it's going to be on Maxlore to choose what he wants to do.
I do think, though, it made sense with the Galio first pick, even though there was like a lot of options. You could have first picked, you know, a ton of other stuff. My brain just went off. But like Cyan was one example of something you could have first picked.
They could have taken the Ryze themselves.
There was a Skarner, there was a Ryze. I think taking the Galio away from Nisqy was smart because I think Nisqy looked so good on it last week and it really fit his playstyle. And I think it's also Sencux playstyle, so I think both mid laners actually really wanted Galio.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I have good news. We are ready to go back to Catcher, so we will return to them now. Thank you for the brief insights on the draft. Let's head back over to QuickShot and Vedius.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for helping out there on that short pause. And of course, glad to see that the same concerns are shared between Analyst Desk and Caster Desk in terms of the Misfits gaming composition. Will they be able to do something quickly enough before the consistent damage of Splyce runs out?
I'm going to throw out a prediction right now.
Okay. This bold.
Misfits will get an early game lead. They will find that early game lead in the bottom lane.
Okay.
They will successfully get a kill or two in the bottom half of the map, and they will be unable to sufficiently snowball, allowing Splyce to come back later on.
Okay, that's not just one prediction. That's a whole series of predictions.
That is how I'm expecting this game to go.
How on earth am I going to track this? Okay, I'm going to write this down.
So let's start with the bot lane things. That's what I'm going to start with.
Okay, got that indeed. You failed mid-game. All right, my notes are now made, and we'll see how accurately you can predict this playstyle. We're taking a look, obviously, back on the Rift. Thank you for rejoining us. That small technical issue has been resolved. And Splyce are on the cusp of knocking G2 out of second. Misfits are on the cusp of competing for that same spot if they pick up a win here. And then they're both sitting just behind G2 eSports with 3 games left to go. You talked about the bottom lane, and you talked about the defensive or lack of damage, rather, not defensive playstyle, the lack of damage. But what about Varus Braum into Caitlyn Janna? No one likes playing into a Caitlyn lane.
No. The general rule of thumb is range supports are often, like, during the laning phase, counter, I use with quotation marks, melee supports, simply because it's easier to harass. And because you can easily harass, it means that you naturally have the push. The advantage for Misfits is that they have the all-in once they hit level 6, which is where Splyce will then have to show more respect to their opposition. But up until that level 6 mark, Splyce should have the push advantage, and they should be the ones zoning Mikyx and Hansama away from the farm.
All right, so let's see how that plays out. And while we get ourselves established into the laning phase, I've got a little bit of a rant I need to get off my chest. Before that pause happened, you started saying some things about Splyce that I did not appreciate. Okay, so I just want to remind you how good Splyce were last week against G2 eSports. Look at this gold graph, how they took down the 4-time consecutive EU LCS champions, and the fact that Splyce is now competing for that spot. It was a fantastic game.
That is a very valid point, QuickShot, but let's look at the 7 other wins that Splyce have had, where you see that line that says 0. That is the amount of gold difference that they have had at certain points in the game. And for the majority of their wins, they've been at a gold deficit. And let's hone in on their last game up against Misfits, because that was not a pretty win. At 52 minutes into the game, yes, Splyce were able to find the win. Misfits do what Misfits commonly do, which is get an early lead and then end up throwing it away. And for Splyce, this is why I'm not convinced, because one of their games was clean. That's great. That's excellent. Until they have 2 or 3 more of them, I'm still looking at every other trend, and I'm noticing that Splyce catch way more throws than they're the ones actually building up the leads for themselves.
See, Vedius, this is where color casters and play-by-plays differ, okay? Because Splyce are resilient. They dig down. They don't lose games from deficits, and graphs just proved it. I value that, but it's clear you do not.
Well, what we both want to see right now for Splyce is a similar performance that they had versus G2
I agree.
eSports.
I agree. That's what I'm looking for as well.
And they have an ability to do it with a gank-heavy jungler like a Xerxe and a couple of playmakers. Cho'Gath, we know, is a lane you can gank because he has a lot of utility and a surprising amount of potential damage. Mid lane, Ryze. Sometimes it can be difficult to kill a Galio, especially with the amount of magic resistance that he naturally has built into his kit. But it is an opportunity. By putting pressure on it, it makes it harder for Sencux to roam. So Xerxe, he can be active in the early game, and it is possible for him to apply pressure without necessarily getting kills.
Okay, and of course your prediction before we had that rant about gold leads was that the same thing would happen again, that Misfits would get ahead and then throw. The question is how much?
That is the question.
That's what we're going to find out. As it stands, it's a very even opening game. The first gank will be here by Maxlore. He's going to follow up onto that taunt from the Durand. Good damage from Winds of War. The shield from Nisqy pops up, and in actual fact, he wins the HP trade war. Maxlore gets wrecked by the tower.
He decides to take an extra tower shot to trade the damage over to Nisqy. He will have the sustain from his W though, so Maxlore will be able to get that back. But he's still hanging around the middle lane. Good ward there from Nisqy will spot him out. No
advantages yet. No lane's been able to push far enough to really make that happen. And Maxlore is continuing to contest the jungle here behind Nisqy. Now, Xerxe was waiting in the wings and will be the first one to move. Stretching strike connects with a chicken. Flash forward there from Nisqy. Gets the root down. First blood available. Not going to be secure just yet. Winds of War. Finally, Nisqy gets the kill secure. Sencux is now running for his life. Nisqy misses the overload. Misses the ability to get a shield. And now Xerxe gets tagged and pulled backwards. A stretching strike comes out. And a miniature Xerxe gets justice punched in the face. A flash forward just for giggles. And it's 2-1 for Splyce.
So Splyce find that early game lead. Probably not how we initially expected. My predictions already gone out the window, and Splyce, they start themselves off with a small advantage as we see a bit of trading down the bottom lane.
Oh, that Unbreakable blocked a lot of damage, and Kobbe got chunked out, but just good positioning and I think communication there from Xerxe and Nisqy. They punished it so well. You can see Xerxe, he approaches this Raptor camp in a moment and just waits for the support to come up.
Now, I think this is smart from Maxlore in the sense that you want to be putting pressure onto a Xerxe in the jungle because he kind of sucks in terms of early skirmishes. The problem is Nisqy is so quick to react that Maxlore's not really in a position to successfully make this play happen. He runs away from his mid laner, who's even further away, and he ends up losing his life. And if Sencux could get away here with just the red buff and a kill, yes, this could have been a favorable trade for Misfits, but Xerxe is able to stick around. He has the constant damage output, and Splyce end up 2 for 1.
Early advantage, 1 kill to Xerxe, 1 kill to Nisqy. I'm very happy that you corrected your prediction, but what does Xerxe do with the rest of this pressure? Where does Xerxe go?
Well, I think he can continue to pressure in the middle lane, try and deny Sencux from going for that ulti play down towards the bot side of the map, which Misfits are still looking for. You can already see the vision being set up towards the bottom side of the map from Misfits. This is definitely the kind of angle that Misfits is trying to play for. Here we go, this is it, this is it. This has to be it.
Oh, not going to happen yet. Remember, Misfits week 1, it's a long time ago. They set it up, but they didn't pull the trigger. I'm waiting for them to pull the trigger. Xerxe's waiting. He's going to be able to respond.
He's backing right now. I can see the play coming in. Misfits, they're going in.
All right, there's the elastic slingshot from Xerxe. It's a 4-on-3. Kobbe forced to flash defensively. He's run down by Maxlore. There's at least a trade back into Mikyx, and the fight is now messy. Kasing's running for his life. Maxlore gets a double kill. It's the smite to secure it. All of a sudden, Xerxe's left alone under the tower. Some support's coming from Nisqy, but I don't think they can win this fight. Misfits with a flawless tower dive.
As predicted, Misfits making the bot lane play. Forget the early skirmish. This is how Misfits wanted to start off their game. Now, Mikyx, he tags the tower a little bit too long, unfortunately, and due to a good ulti there from Xerxe and the fact that the tower aggro actually swapped over to Mikyx meant that he ended up losing his life, so it ends up being a 2-for-1. But the reality is, Misfits are still able to shut down the bottom lane. They burn every single summoner spell. Hansama is able to get a lot of early gold, and importantly, Maxlore gets the early lead that we talk so much about in the draft.
And of course, first move after that tower dive, Kobbe is going to leave the lane. Nature's Grasp is thrown down by Alphari just to, I think, push that wave out, remove any sort of threat of a dive. And first lane swap. So talk to me about the map now. What is this going to do? Obviously, Kobbe and Kasing sort of surrendering that 2v2, but it's going to allow them a lot of damage top.
Exactly that. Splyce's bottom lane was concerned about the all-in power that Mikyx and Hansama now have with both the Varus ultimate, the Braum ultimate, and the lack of summoner spells that they had available. So the best strategy for them is swap out, secure an early tower, and then just kind of stall, avoid the threatening lanes. Misfits, they just kind of accepted it, and they'll be looking to trade a tower themselves in the bottom side of the map, but it should be a little bit slower. The other fortunate thing going in favor of Splice is that it is an early Cloud Drake on the board, so even if Misfits secure that early Dragon, it's not the end of the world for Splice.
Okay, let's see who's going to get the advantage. I mean, one of the options, I suppose, of reducing that Galio dive power, open the map up. Prevent an extended laning phase. Prevent such a clean, easy setup from happening. And I want to see how these lane assignments play out, because if you can keep playing that sort of dominoes game where you move your pieces around side to side, you never allow Sencux and Maxlore to have that dive buddy combo that we just saw.
And I think it's important for Misfits to once again find this early lead. We've talked about its value, but also how we've talked a lot about that they regularly lose it. And I want to take this opportunity to look back at how they've often compared versus some of the top of the table teams and some of the bottom of the table teams. And now, this is very close, right? And the reason why we bring this up is because typically, if a team is sitting around the middle of the pack, they have a lot of wins over the bottom tier teams and not many wins over the top tier ones. But for Misfits, they actually have more wins over the top of the table teams than they do the bottom ones. And this just kind of highlights their inconsistencies and how sometimes when they get these early leads, they've been able to properly snowball in conjunction with their early game strategy of make Hansama the carry, but also how often they've just thrown.
Yeah, and of course Misfits, the only team in the league to have a 2-0 head-to-head over Fnatic. Taking them down consistently both times, dramatic games, both times. With a couple of those mistakes, a couple of those back and forths. And as we've crested 10 minutes, Splice got the first tower, as well as the first blood. Misfits, on the other hand, they got the first dragon. It's a cloud, arguably actually going to help them out with this comp that really does want to set up those dives, initiate. But we'll see how effectively they can do it, because Hero's Entrance is available. Maxwell's waiting in the wings. There's a bajillion wards in the river.
Bajillion, exactly that many.
And Xerxe's read it, though. He's aware. He's waiting for this initiation. And he stood in a control ward, so he knows the vision's not there.
Here it comes, here it comes.
All right, where's the Hero's Entrance? Sencux is coming down. Gigantic Monsoon in the back end. That's healing up Splice, but for how long? Kobbe is already taken down. 2 quick kills for Misfits. They've got the damage now. And Xerxe's gonna jump forward, elastic slingshot. The tower's not in range just yet, and he's forced to run for his life. Another 2-for-1.
Exactly the same play happens to Misfits, and even though Xerxe tries to be there to respond, it ends up in exactly the same way. Tower will now go over in favor of Misfits. They pick up 2 extra kills. They're continuing to shut down the superstar bot lane of Kobbe and Kasing. And Misfits, get themselves the early game lead that they wanted.
Man, what another good dive. Mikyx is the sacrificial lamb, though, both times.
And my biggest criticism here is look in the middle lane. Yes, the dive, very much exactly what we saw from last time, but why is Nisqy walking towards the top side rather than trying to answer this play that Misfits is setting up? They've already done it once. You know that they're going to do it because Xerxe's in a position to do so, yet Nisqy, with enough time to make a round walk play towards the bottom side of the map, does not respond and allows Misfits to get the advantages that they've been playing for in this early game.
Teleport was available for Odo as well. Very clear. Xerxe's reading the play, letting the team know, I would assume, in terms of the comms. Xerxe, by the way, 3-0-1, the recipient of a lot of those kills. Though, if this were solo queue, I would be a very unhappy man because Maxlore's Olaf, 100% kill participation, 3-1-2 already. And it sucks when an Olaf gets fed, and you have to deal with that. One thing I will give you credit for, though, Vedius, your prediction came abundantly true after that little trade in the jungle. So I will ignore that for this scenario. Give me another prediction. What happens next?
So, next prediction will be that Misfits will look to play through the... Okay, this is less of a prediction, like, this is what I expect the teams to do. But what I expect to happen is Misfits will look to play through mid, because if they can open up that mid lane tower, setting up deep vision becomes easier, and utilizing the Galio becomes easier, which is very crucial for this Misfits squad, which is why Kobbe and Kasing have already been rotated here. They want to act as wave clear, which is much harder in theory to dive than a Ryze. And so that'll be Misfits' next game plan. But I'm still concerned about the rate at which Misfits is snowballing. They have a decent... I mean, they have kind of a very small goal lead at the time being. Yeah. And once we reach 25 minutes, when Splice are in a better position to team fight, that's when I'm looking at this roster and thinking, okay, Splice, better position to try and force the Baron, better position to actually have more damage in these fights. And I think Misfits really need to keep the pressure going, which I'm not entirely confident they can do.
If you're a Splice fan, and if you are looking for them to challenge for second seed, looking them to get that quarterfinal bye, Splice all split long have been a good team fighting team.
Yes.
They have been good in the mid to late game. They've shown as a 5-man unit they've been strong when other elements of their game have been weaker. And they're on even-ish gold right now with a team comp that could play very well. So that's one thing that we have to be aware of, especially with the limited amount of damage Misfits have to offer.
And when we say limited, we mean like if Misfits can't naturally get that burst out from Sencux, right? But even then, like, Sencux hasn't gone for the Electrocute Galio that we saw a lot of in the EU LCS. He's actually gone for the Aftershock, which has become a little bit more common over in the LCK, which is more of the off-tank Galio, frontline kind of diving dude that just soaks up a lot more damage compared to going for that one shot that he often did so regularly during the regular season of EU.
I like that. The diving dude. Well, we'll see what the diving dude Sencux can do, because he's currently working with the rest of the team. 5 members of Misfits near this mid tower. And Misfits' vision this game has felt excessive, but effective.
Yeah.
Because every side of the map they are playing on has been very well warded. If you look at the minimap, Misfits have got a plethora of wards in the top half. Like, the entire top half of the map is in vision. And that was why they were pushing the top tower. Obviously, Peel to go middle now.
But I am surprised that they chose to use the Rift Tile top rather than mid. I felt like that they had more than enough time to properly set up for it. And now it kind of feels like that they need to reset. The Maokai has now moved back towards top. Galio has actually gone towards bot lane. His TP is on cooldown, but will be up relatively soon. And to me, it feels like Misfits kind of dropped the ball a little bit there. Splice will be bought a little bit more time of reprieve, can continue to farm. Remember though, at this point in the game, Misfits is definitely stronger. Rageblade already finished for Hansama. The engage tools on Misfits, so much stronger than that of Splice. And Nisqy still stacking up his tier. So Misfits will be the ones keen to fight, and Splice for now just going to rely on the stall game.
Well, look, in this game, Misfits control their destiny, right? They have to make the dives, they have to make this Galio damage
Very
work,
true.
Protect Hansama. There's an initiation somewhat here from Xerxe, but also Misfits control their destiny outside of the game as well. If you look at the next few opponents, Giants, Rocket, Unicorns, all directly around them in the standings. And if Misfits win out, they just guarantee not only that playoff spot, but potentially even higher seeding.
And expectations would be that Misfits would be the favorite in those matches, but the reason why this Splyce one is so important for them is because they want to solidify themselves as ideally a top 2 team.
Yes.
Coming into playoffs last split, they were like the 6th place team that everyone's expectations were so low of that people thought they were just going to get rolled over. And then they surprised everyone and they made it to finals.
Vedius, you said at the beginning of the year that we should not expect a huge amount from Misfits, that it's going to be another slow regular season, that this is a team and an organization that thrives in best of 5s, that thrives in prep, that thrives in that environment. You know, really study a single opponent for a week, figure out how to beat them, and that was the Misfits that got to Worlds, that made it to quarterfinals. We're kind of seeing exactly that. We're kind of building up because the Misfits mistakes and the Misfits errors that we've seen all split long, they don't seem like they are insurmountable problems as we near the end of the split.
Yes, but
you can't ignore them.
But that's the big thing, right? I'm glad that they found ways to mitigate the weakness or the exploitable weakness that has been Sencux during the laning phase. And I'm also glad that Misfits have been experimenting with all of these different compositions while sometimes they have been unable to execute. And why that makes me excited is coming into playoffs, Misfits know that whatever the meta is, they can pull it off. Now they've got to pull off securing this mid tower.
All right, flash away from Hans Sama. Let's bounce used by Xerxe, and he's going to escape with his life. Maxlore waiting off to the right-hand side of your screen, and it is still a dead even game. 1 tower to 1. Gold is very close. Misfits have got the late game insurance of 2 dragons. So while they may not have a huge amount of natural damage built into their comp, an Elder Dragon plus however many Elemental Dragons may just be enough. Chain of Corruption will lock down Xerxe. His passive is going to get popped. That self-division is already all grouped up. Realm Orb comes out from Nisqy. A teleport from Odo. He gets interrupted. Shut down onto Xerxe. That was a great interrupt. A cheeky attempt to save his teammate from Odo. Ace in the hole will tag Hunt. Remember, he used his flash already. Nisqy's looking to lock down Maxlore. Overload into Rune Prison. Won't be able to lock him down anymore with the Ragnarocking Olaf running away. And Splyce, despite trading 1 for 1, they are the ones that are getting the tower damage. The fight's not over yet. Winds of War flying in from the side. Splyce take down the mid tower, and they're retreating to save their lives.
Surprised that we saw no Galio ulti there. Felt like the Misfits were in a prime position to use it, and that could have been the thing that helped them secure the team fight win, but it ends up in a 1 for 1. Splyce secure themselves a tower, and the game remains close. Now, this initiation has been done multiple times from Xerxe, largely to zone Misfits away and help wave clear. But a good ulti from Mikyx and a follow-up from Hansam allows them to get the punish. Now here's where Alphari makes the slight mistake of drawing minion aggro and then getting locked up by a good rune prison from Nisqy. Combine that with the burst damage from the Cho'Gath, and it resulted in a very quick shutdown of the front line from Misfits.
One of the things that we talked a lot about from the Splyce side, the reactions. When something is thrown at them, when an event happens, their reaction to their opponent's decisions seems to be very good, and that response team fight, the fact that they got the tower out of the deal as well and have defended their own mid tower, is a good setup, and we're still so close at 20 minutes. The Righteous Glory picked up for Maxlore plus Predator. He's going to be flying forward. And Vedius, I'm seeing a wit's end here. Second item for Hansama seems pretty logical into Zac, Cho'Gath, and Ryze.
And a Janna. So the basically lots of magic damage on the side of Splyce. 4 huge AP damage.
Janna's definitely what I'm scared about. You know?
Dude, that area damage is obnoxious. Regardless, the point is, I think it makes sense. And it synergizes nicely. It's called the on-hit Varus build. Wouldn't be surprised if we went for a Blade of the Ruin King next. And in drawn-out fights, that Varus will hurt. He definitely scales well. And let me tell you why I love this pick so much more for Misfits than Ezreal. Because the thing about Ezreal is you have to play him perfectly. Because once you have the power spike, if you mess up at all and the enemy team can stall, then he basically offers very little value. Whereas Varus, if you mess up, he still offers value. Now, looking at Nisqy, he's trying to escape.
Oh my word! Look at those blue suede shoes and the two-step. Nisqy survives long enough to bait out a summoner spell or 2. Flash from Sencux, flash from Alphari for the follow-up engage. Now Kasing's running for his life. Nature's Grasp is trying to catch him. And despite Nisqy doing his best effort, he still gets run down and the tower falls, but I like the sidesteps.
Bit of a weird flash there from Alphari. Not sure what his intention was. Difficult for the rest of Misfits to follow up. And Splice are able to successfully trade towers as Odo secures himself that tower down in the bottom lane.
Whoa.
Is this it? Is this the moment where Splice could throw the game?
There was risky Baron calls last weekend. Remember, Baron, the first take is going lower and lower. Sencux gets a Justice Punch onto Kasing, forces out the Monsoon. 3,000 hit points. Xerxe's got Flash and Smite available. There's a steal on the cards. They're also into a feast. And Misfits, they realize the risk. And they back away into Smite plus Feast. That's never going to be a 50-50.
So I think their goal was to try and rush the Baron down and maybe find a pick onto a member of Splice with Sencux lying in wait. But Odoamne was able to get to the Baron and they couldn't do enough damage to it where they felt confident enough to try and go for the plays that they did last week where they often CC'd the enemy jungler, then secured it, and then ran away. So Misfits just, again, something that they've done a lot during the regular season, use the Baron to, not for the Baron itself, but as an opportunity to create plays. And unfortunately for them, they were not able to make much happen this time around.
Of course, it forces your opponent hand. You have to respond. You can't give that over, especially not at 22 minutes. And this time around, Splyce are now setting up. It's an Infernal Dragon, third of the game at 22 minutes. That's a fairly high number of dragons, but look at the Summoner spell cooldowns. Teleport for Sencux available, but there's no hero's entrance. And that dragon was just instantly run down. Realm Warp's going to be used to take Splyce to safety. And they easily get the objective. We're setting ourselves up for a crazy, crazy mid-game.
We certainly are, and you're still thinking at the back of your mind, was the early lead big enough for Misfits that coming into the mid-game, they will be able to win out on these fights? Will they have the damage required? We saw Sencux go for that burst combo, and he wasn't able to one-shot the Janna. Nope. He's not going for the full kind of AP one-shot build. He's being that front line, he's being that extra utility, and all of the damage is coming down onto Handsummer. And that's not to say he can't do it. We've seen him do it in the past. He's been a big carry for the team, but it's always worrying when you only have this single player to rely on when these next few fights are going to be the determining point as to who takes the game.
It also feels like whichever team gains an advantage has all of the tools in their kit to keep pressing that advantage.
It's true.
They've got a lot of engage, a lot of initiation, actually both sides of the Rift. And as you can see on your screen, it is a peripheral-related issue on the Misfits camp. I'm going to assume Alphari because as our running commentary goes...
Mouse sensitivity is what I was told.
Oh, interesting, interesting.
Fun fact, I play with a DPI of 3,000.
Yeah, but that's horrific.
It's
Your wrist, if you just accidentally twitch, will send you like everywhere on the Rift.
Oh, it's perfect. So the reason why it's that, it may be the reason why I have really bad wrist issues now, but when I was starting as a League of Legends player, I was told that pro players had extremely high DPIs.
And you believe that person?
I was under the impression that because I wanted to be a pro player, that I started doing that. So I bought a mouse that had 3 settings, which was 700 DPI, 1200 DPI, and
3,000.
3,000, and I immediately put it to 3,000. That's still my mouse today, and it's the only mouse I can use.
So did you also follow a pro player advice on whether it's flash on D or flash on F? How did you determine that?
I just used whatever the default was, which was D default flash.
So you and I are both flash on D?
We are.
Settled. It's the only way to use flash. Everyone else that uses on F, you're wrong. The settings issue has been resolved, and we're loading back onto the Rift. Thank you for that nice little diatribe on the side. I use much lower sensitivity because I come from an FPS background.
Oh, that's fair.
There we go. Well, let's take a look at 23 minutes. And the Baron attempt from Misfits felt risky, but they peeled away at the right time. We've seen some risky Baron setups all split long, all year long, actually.
Like Vitality?
Like all the time, right? But let's evaluate how both of these teams play around Baron. What is your opinion on how... Let's start with Splice, because we've already covered some of Misfits and their Barons over the last, let's say, 3 weeks, recent memory.
So I don't think Splice have had the best Baron setups. I think that a lot of them have kind of been haphazard, and I mean, that kind of goes to show, given that last week in the single Splice game, there were 3 Baron steals, 2 of which were done by Xerxe, but the fact that they were in a position where they had to steal the Baron rather than set up for it is not an ideal one. And like, they had to steal the Baron away from Schalke too. Like, their Baron setup overall has not been ideal.
Right.
I think that's just something we heard from Kasing when he was on the podcast, was very much that the members of the team have different ideas about how to play. And we'll see how that works. Xerxe,
he's in so much trouble. We'll be able to use that ultimate to escape. Chain of Corruption spreads, locks down several members of Splyce. Okay, the tower is still alive, but not for much longer. Wit's End, Cutlass, as well as Rage Blade for Hans Sama. He's going to need 2 or 3 autos, and this tower will fall. Eye of the Storm will delay some of it, and Odo's going to use those spikes of his to clear out the wave as best as possible. And look, it's even game still. The tower has not fallen. The pressure is there, but Splyce are responding exceptionally well, and it just feels like they kind of have an answer to what Misfits are doing, despite how proactive Misfits are playing.
Yep. Splyce doing a good job of stalling things out. They're grouping up as a 5-man, ready to react. Galio not quite in range to ulti right now, but this should be the secure of the tower for Misfits.
Yeah, will go down. Miky's the target, taking a lot of damage. Xerxe's ultimate's on cooldown. That's a great stretching strike. Pulls 2 members of Misfits together. The hero's entrance comes down from Sencux, and that's going to be an easy kill. It's for Kobbe, though, and Splyce are now trying to push forward Alphari, despite all of the shields, and the damage reduction just held in place for too long.
Yeah, but true damage as well. Like Odoamne, this is the thing. He's a great tank shredder. You engage with your front line onto his front line, and he's going to have an easier time just ripping through the Maokai than the Maokai will of the Cho'Gath. And this is the second time we've seen it now. It is Kobbe to secure himself that extra kill. And while he is at a big deficit, look, he's completed 2.5 items, and he's well on his way to reaching that mid-game Caitlyn point. The Misfits should be rather scared.
Okay, so talk me through this play here. Was this just a mistake by Misfits, or
well, I mean,
they got the tower?
They believe that they can go for the fight, and I don't think the engage there from Alphari is necessarily the wrong one. It just kind of felt like that Misfits were a little undecided as to what they wanted to do, whether it was immediately disengage or go for the full-on fight. Galio came in to try and keep the top laner alive rather than as an opportunity to fight, and then afterwards Maxlore went in and Mikyx re-engaged, and it just felt a little bit like that there were 2 different decisions as to what they wanted to do. They still get the tower, they lost a member, and gaining that extra bit of map control is something that Misfits are always going to be happy about.
Okay, so we keep talking a lot about the Misfits' damage and late game. How are they going to play these fights? Can they get a kill instantly? Can they protect Hans Sama long enough to get the damage down with that on-hit build? There's a super soaker on Galio. That's what I wanted to ask you about. What do you think of the GLP 800?
I don't really understand. So, for those unaware, a bunch of item changes came out in the middle lane fairly recently. I can hear... Ooh,
there's action coming. You're going to have to talk about those items in a moment. Here comes Xerxe, unsee. Let's bounce, gets pulled backwards, but it is instantly interrupted. Chain of Corruption slowly going to spread. The target is Odoamne, but his feast is phenomenal. The Monsoon healing up the back line. That's the counter to a low damage comp. Nobody dies yet. Those defensive flashes go out. Body blocked by Hans Sama. He protects Mikyx from his former AD carry. And Kobbe, despite not getting the kill, is moving with Splyce to Baron.
Look at how much HP Splyce have. They're still more than happy to fight. Mikyx is low, Alphari got chunked low. He does have the TP so he can go back to base, but like it is getting harder and harder for this Misfits composition to fight. And Splyce are more than happy to just draw the game out. They're confident in their ability to team fight, and I really just don't see the value in this GLP.
All right, tell me why not. What is it that you don't like in this scenario setup?
So there are 3 mana items now that give you the haste passive, which is a cooldown reduction. You have the Luden's Echo, you have the Tear of the Goddess, which eventually evolves into the Archangel Staff, and then you have the GLP, which I love to refer to as the Get Lucky Punk. And for a Galio, when his primary responsibility is wave clear, I feel like Luden's makes more sense. But forget that, because Baron started, Splyce have full vision control, and it's gone.
Yep, indeed, Rooney. Realm Warp for the escape, and Splyce just sneak the Baron.
Right, that was clean. I criticized their Baron, but that was really good. They had good vision setup. They'd been controlling the river for a while. Ever since that last fight happened, Misfits had to recall, and Splyce have now secured it. Really good play. And I feel like that their comp is going to start doing them favors. I do not know how Misfits will successfully be able to deny the Baron minion that's well on its way. I'm sure Bob is ready for another adventure. And now the Drake has been started off by Misfits.
Oh, this is so exciting for the end of the split. Misfits are setting themselves up to contest G2 eSports. Misfits are 8-6. If they win, they go 9-6. G2 are currently 9 wins, 5 losses. And of course, there is a couple of games coming up. Thank you very much, production team. There's how close the standings are. Vitality with their win earlier today also 9 and 6. How Vitality are in the race for second seed. Misfits, do you know what? If they lose the next few games, if they get upset, however unlikely that may be, maybe they fall out of playoffs. It's a possibility.
Certainly is.
Even at this stage of the split.
Also remember that Misfits do not currently have the head-to-head record over Splyce. If they secure the win here, they will have the 2-0, and should Splyce have a rough end to the split and Misfits get those next 3 wins, Splyce will be the ones to come out ahead. So it's like this win is very important for both these teams. They're 2 of the teams fighting for that top 3 spot, ideally top 2 to get themselves the bye. And right now, it is Misfits that are struggling.
Well, listen, damage to Oblivion is what Sencux says, because he's picked up the Oblivion Orb. Now, up in the top lane, Bob and his buddy, banner-empowered cannon minions, will take down the inhibitor turret. Mikyx has already been chunked so low, 250 HP. He stood on a trap. The Unbreakable will block as well as the Locket of the Iron Solari, but Splyce will get themselves another tower. Look at the mini-map. Splyce have got 3 pushing waves. They've set the siege up flawlessly. Monsoon used to keep the minions alive. This Baron power play is going to be monstrous. Inhibitor number 1 is going to fall. They can peel away with the Realm Warp. Oh my word, Splyce! This is just dirty! Another tower is going to fall, and Misfits, there's literally nothing they can do.
Splyce looking so clean right now. I might have to board the hype train because Splyce looking to get themselves the 9-6 record. That gold lead has exploded. This is Misfits' final answer.
Teleport in from behind, but the fight has already started. Here comes Sencux, Justice Punch on the front line. Nisqy gets the first kill of the fight, and Kobbe's currently untouched. Sencux running for his life, and so is Maxlore. Runs in and runs out. Flash forward for Nisqy. Baron empowered minions, they're not done yet. If Misfits lose too many more members, this could be the game. It's a double kill for Kobbe and Splyce. They're looking to push down. Another inhibitor is going to fall, and the top lane's exposed, but they're setting aside to the Nexus.
Once again, a huge team fight for Splyce, demonstrating their ability to work as a 5-man. And Trevor, I think that's going to be game.
There's no doubt about it. The Nexus is getting destroyed. Misfits are wrecked, and Splyce are racing for second place.
Splyce, they did fall behind a little bit in the early game, but they answered well. They swapped their bottom lane up to the top. They kept the gold even. Misfits couldn't snowball the early game, and it kind of went, I don't know, like I predicted a little bit.
Yep.
They got advantages in the early game. They got them through the bottom lane. They failed to team fight, and then it was simply a matter of Splyce outscaling and outperforming in these fights.
Like I said at the beginning of the game, Vedius, Splyce smashed the G2 last week.
That's true.
And while the gold graph may not look as dramatic in this game, they just felt like the more in-control team. Their team composition maybe allowed them more options, cannot be understated. Because despite some flawless dives, Misfits just did not get enough of a lead. They just did not get enough advantage from it to go further.
But I've also got to criticize this build from
Sencux,
yeah, in the middle lane. Like, it doesn't make much sense to me. I'm not sure what the goal was. Why did they need another tank? I don't see an issue in this comp going for like the full burst damage kind of setup. I don't see the issue with being that extra threat. And he decided not to. He decided to be a tank, and I feel like that hurt the team much more than it helped it. And then like going GLP into what was looking like a Morello knock. Third item Morello makes, like, it does not make a huge amount of sense. So a lot of question marks around Misfits. Wasn't happy with the draft. They couldn't properly execute. And Splyce, they did exactly the opposite. They drafted a well-rounded comp. They mitigated a lot of the early strengths that Misfits composition were able to bring. And then they got to a point that they knew they could out-team fight, and they did exactly that.
So, Vedius, this brings us to a situation where Splyce are now 9 wins, 6 losses. They are currently tied for second with Vitality and G2. Of course, G2 can win that game later, go to 10 wins. If Fnatic win their game, they go to 11 wins, so the race is on. If anybody makes a mistake, if anybody drops another game, to a bottom of the table team, then all of a sudden that second place seed is up for grabs between 3 different teams.
And just as a reminder for those that may have only joined us for this game, Fnatic did in fact secure themselves the playoff spot due to the results from the previous games of the day. So they are locked into playoffs. It's yet to be determined where their position is yet.
Yes, and of course I have a question that I don't want you to answer right now.
Okay.
But I am going to pose it.
Sure. And
I'm asking you guys at home to think about this as well. Misfits are now 7 wins and 8 losses. The guys below them are 6 and 9. It's a 1 or 2 game spree. I said that Misfits control their own destiny. Their strength of schedule, looking forward as soon as I can find it, is Giants, Roccat, and Unicorns of Love. They are at risk of losing their playoff seed. Will they lose it? That's the question you're not allowed to answer because Pyra is standing by on stage with Splyce's AD carry.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Now, I am, of course, joined by Kobbe. And before we get into this game, you had some choice words to say to your former support that you played up against today. I just had to ask you, how bad was that breakup?
It was a bit tough in the beginning. I played with Mikyx for like 1.5 years, 2 years almost. So it was kind of tough, but I found a good replacement. So that made it like, yeah. It was nice.
Clearly already been finding a lot of success there with Kasing. Now, I want to dive into this week and especially comparing it to last because it was such a bizarre topsy-turvy week. You almost perfect game G2, then basically almost lost up against Rocket. This week, business as usual. You come back in the late game. What changed?
I mean, today, when I saw the draft, I knew that I was probably going to die a few times in the early game because they had like full early game comp, dive bot lane, Snowball. So it wasn't exactly planned to go to a usual, or not usual, but full late game. But we knew that, like, I think we did a really good job at holding our mid tower alive, which was extremely important for this game. And I think we just stalled it out well. And if our comp against theirs, if it goes past 20 minutes, then we just auto-win, basically.
You do seem very comfortable with these style of compositions Splyce does. Now, can you tell me why you guys tend to, more often than not, always draft for these late game situations?
I mean, I feel like we haven't done it that much the past few weeks, like in the first 4 weeks where we did it almost every game. But today we got in a situation where they just, like with how they drafted, it was kind of hard to avoid. So yeah, we're just trying to show more styles than only that, but of course you can pull it out in important games like this. So.
Yeah, so experiment when you can and just take the wins when you can as well. Now, looking ahead, you guys are very close to playoffs like a lot of teams are, but this win is very important for it. How confident are you that you can secure at least that second seed?
I mean, I want to say I'm confident that we can secure a second seed, but we kind of have to rely on G2 messing up 1 or 2 games, so I don't really like to rely on other teams messing up. But I think for us, we just focus on winning our last 3 games now, and I think we should be able to do it if we just keep our momentum up, so maybe we can get second.
Keep your head in the game, and of course, keeping the fingers crossed for H2K next game, and we'll get into that one later. But first, we got to send it off to the post-game analysis over to Dracos.
Thank you very much, Pyra. Now, a very dominant start for Misfits. Their composition working as intended. I feel like Splyce rather unable to stop all these tower dives.
Smack, smack, smack.
And it looked good. And then it looked really bad. And it was a very sudden transition, but it happened. So for me, I want to know, from your guys' perspective, what was the actual break point where this started to go wrong for Misfits? Because the first couple dives looked absolutely fantastic, and then just slowed down.
I think we will completely agree with the Fisher because, you know, they won the bot lane. They started diving bot lane. They took all the advantages they wanted. But then once it came to swap to mid lane, Zach was there, Xerxe. The Zach pick was so crucial for the defending of the mid tower, where Handsama was just so scared to hit the tower when Zach was constantly pressuring him. And it took them too much time to snowball the lead.
I find it very interesting that they, after killing bot tower, they're like, haha, mid tower, that's what we need. I'm like, why not just swap top first?
Yeah, they should have swapped top.
Kill the top much early. We're talking like, what, 14, 15 minutes into the game. Push that lane deeper, so when you actually are going to siege on mid turret, you can walk in and find Xerxe, and he can't just jump over the wall every time, and you can pretty easily threaten them to back off with Kate Janna, and you can just take the turret. We're talking again pre-20 minutes, and then suddenly it gets a lot easier to play your snowball comp.
And
but
on the one
they
hand,
were like, nah, mid tower.
Splyce did a really good job of stopping some of this, but also does feel like a lot of missteps coming in for the Misfits. Now, there was one replay that we kind of talked about throughout the entire game, one kind of moment here. Deficio, I want you to run us through it because you were especially vocal about like kind of what went wrong in the Misfits decision-making, but it looks bad from an audience perspective because it involves Splyce members dying, but it's actually totally fine.
It's just, this is why I sometimes get scared when Misfits draft comes, they get outscaled pretty hard because they have these tendencies to not take the big windows they get to really snowball the game. So the example here is where it's actually fine for Misfits. After they've given up killing mid tower, they finally realized maybe we should just go top instead. They kill Nisqy. And now,
messed up. So.
Yeah, so he, okay, fine, he ends up dying in Flash where he tries to buy time. What's important here now is the fact that Odoamne, you guys can't see it, we're hiding it for you, but he's bot lane without teleport. And Misfits could rush Baron instantly. We're back, guys. So let's pretend we go back 5 seconds in time here. They kill Nisqy. Odoamne is sitting bot lane without teleport. If you're Misfits, you have all 5 members top.
You have Varus with Grinso, which is one of the strongest rushing down Baron.
Exactly. Olaf as well, drops a bit low the Baron, smack, smack, smack. Great. You have tanks in a Maokai who can tank. Rush the Baron at 20 minutes, or 21 minutes this is. Rush it. Top laner, Cho'Gath, no TP, can't join in time. Don't flash randomly go on the enemy Janna without your team there to follow up. Then spend about 15 seconds running around in a circle for Odoamne to kill your bot lane tower and walk all the way from bot lane to Baron by the time Misfits were like, oh, I guess we should do Baron here. And then it's like, now it's too late, and now you can't finish it.
Yeah, and I mean, it did really, really fall apart. And the worst part is that once the ball was in Splyce's court, once the game started to even out, we hit the point where Caitlyn isn't quite as scared as she once was of the Olaf. Splyce immediately start making aggressive decisions. If we take a look at our next replay, not any kind of hesitation when it came to Splyce. They see an opportunity to Baron, and they just make it happen. No worries here.
Yeah, they have Ryze as well, so that Ryze Caitlyn combo that instantly rushes down Nashor. You know, Ryze super high damage on Q, and then Caitlyn just out-attacking over the wall. But for me, it's Misfits. You know, I have to say that it's Misfits. I've seen them play throughout the entire split, and they've been setting up themselves with these champion drafts where they just pick early game, mid game, and they have to snowball. They put themselves in the situation where they have to squeeze all the advantages they can get, and they just don't get it.
Yeah, again, they don't abuse the windows that are actually there to get the big leads. Not the, we got one extra kill, or, okay, we eventually got a tower. Like, you need the Baron. Then you need to take multiple turrets from that. Then you need to deny jungle camps from the enemy. And then the next Baron is where maybe you finish the game. I want to give credit to Splyce, though, because they keep showing to me smarter and smarter shot calling. Whenever they defended mid-turret for the first, like, you know, between 20 and 30 minutes, they never got greedy or like, we're going to rush out and force a fight now or anything. They're like, yeah, kill water in the enemy river near Baron, kill a Rift Scuttler, go back. Let's just reset again. Buy a bit more time, and then they find that opening to make the Baron play we just saw here, and game is over.
Lo and behold, Caitlyn has 3 items.
Yeah, game
she
is
can be the
completely
Messiah.
over.
I mean, let's look at the final team fight. It is an important reminder, like, when we talk about these team compositions being on a timer, right, and falling off, you can sort of see it in this fight in the sense that they just don't have the damage.
Here. Like, you know, you have to kill Caitlyn here. That has a Janna shield that's about 1k damage right now. He flashes away from Galio, and then Ryze Caitlyn just... That's a nasty combo with the trap, and you can't really do anything. At this point, you don't have damage to kill the front line.
And in this game, we had Rage Blade on Hansama when Kobbe was sitting on a BF sword. Like that, it almost cannot be bigger in terms of the difference in power spike. And yet, the Kobbe 2v2 lane were able to defend the mid-turret for 20 minutes, basically, against a Rage Blade Varus. And these kind of things, the goal graph kind of shows it as well, how Misfits just kept kind of like basically getting a little bit ahead, but then never enough. And the moment we got to late game, crash.
Bam, yeah.
That's like watching Bitcoin right there, crashing straight down.
You guys need to get out of Bitcoin, man. You guys and your cryptocurrency. All right, well, Splyce did look fantastic, and Misfits looked shaky, but with Splyce taking a crucial win, rather, in the fight for the top spot, we are going to take a look at the latest update on the standings. For more, let's hear from Aaron Medic Chamberlain.
Thank you very much.